It's been a little while. Some things have been happening, boring life things, but we're back. I am back. Maybe the room is the reason the sound is so weird. If you are very perceptive, you'll notice I'm in a different room. I had to move house at quite short notice, which included like finding somewhere to live, packing, moving, sorting all of that stuff out. And yeah, so YouTube videos didn't happen for that entire time. But I'm now in the new house, in the new flat, as you can see. All the windows are open and there are things going on outside, so apologies if you can hear that. And the sound isn't very good. When I was doing my test earlier, I've got a new laptop. I don't know if that's something to do with it, but also I feel like this room is very echoey. But maybe when I've got more stuff in it, it will be less echoey. So yes, YouTube videos have not happened for the last couple of months. A lot of blogging has happened. I have had time to sort of read and be reviewing books, but not to just sit in front of a camera looking awake and engaging and with my makeup done and do editing. So there's a little shout out to my blog, go check it out, link in the description. But today we have a long overdue May wrap up. I'm filming this on the 12th of July and this is my May wrap up. So we're only like 5 weeks late. But yeah, it was a long time ago. I think I can remember the books pretty well. We'll see. We will find out together. I also don't have any of them to show you because they're all in storage. So editing me is just gonna stick them all up on the screen, all the covers, as and when we get to them. So yeah, let's get stuck into my very overdue May wrap up. So for my wrap-ups, I like to rank all the books I read in a particular month. So we'll be starting with my least favourite book that I read in May and going all the way up to my favourite book I read in May. Now May was a very 4-star month for me. I read 1 3-star book, 2 5-star books, and everything else was 4 stars. There was lots of stuff that I enjoyed, but just didn't really blow me away. I don't know what they're doing out there, but it's making a lot of noise. We're just going to get stuck straight in with the only 3-star book I read in May, which is I, Coriander by Sally Gardner. Now, although the actual book itself was a slight disappointment, I read this for the Buzzword Reading Challenge and the May prompt was a flavour, and I feel like I nailed this prompt with picking the title, I, Coriander. Perfect. How many other book titles have coriander in the title? I was very proud of myself. The fact that I can't really remember this book very much, I think speaks to why it was 3 stars. It was very, it was about a girl called Coriander living in, I want to say 17th century London. I think it was the 1600s. Yes, because it was in the Commonwealth. It's all coming back to me. All coming back to me. Post-English Civil War, Oliver Cromwell, that's where we're at. And there were some sort of fantasy elements, but it was very weird. And not in like a good weird way. It was just weird. It wasn't bad. It was just weird. That's my review of I, Coriander. They're just weird. So now we're on to the 4-star reads. And so the first one I'm going to talk to you about is The Ghost of Sarah Jane by Sarah J. Natchin. This is a Southern Gothic mystery, kind of Romeo and Juliet vibes story. And I listened to the audiobook, which had 2 actors reading all the dialogue, and the author read the not dialogue. It's been a long time since I've had an English lesson. Like 12 years since I've had an English lesson. So apologies to my English teacher, who I am friends with on Facebook. I should message him and be like, what's not dialogue? Everything's going really well. So it's Southern Gothic, it's a tragedy, and it's in 4 parts, and it sort of all examines this, the death of this young girl in the early 20th century, and all the events surrounding her death and the aftermath of her death and the impact it had on her community. Lots of different ideas explored here, ideas of social class, of race, of family rivalries. There was all sorts of layers here, and the whole book was sort of unpeeling those layers and seeing all these different things that make people tick in this small town. Next up on the 4-star list is The Soul Machines by, and I apologise if I pronounce this incorrectly, Alexandru Chimbor. I think that's how you say it. This book is set in Transylvania in the early 20th century, kind of similar time period actually, so just before the First World War, and follows 3 friends, all from different backgrounds, all from different classes and ethnic backgrounds, who are sort of caught up in this story of this mysterious object and these mysterious objects that have been appearing and are being investigated. Setting was the real kind of winner of this book for me. It was so atmospheric. You could just feel like you were in that forest the whole time, in that sort of rural space, in that time and place. Just felt so immersive. You couldn't help but kind of get lost in it. And I really liked all the friendships as well. The friendships, the dynamics between the characters really brought the whole book to life. I did not like the ending though. I won't spoil it, but I did not like the ending. I think it would be a divisive ending. I would be interested to know what other people think and interested to talk to other people who have read the book about the ending. But the rest of it was great. I Know You by Russel Govan is a time travel romance, but a little bit different from the time travel romances we're used to. And so this one follows a teenage girl, that she's 18, and I will try to pronounce her name. Ailey, I think it's Ailey. I think it was Ailey. So rather than have the time travel element be that these 2 people always see each other at different ages and different stages of their lives, which can get a little bit dicey in some cases, then in this book, then the time travel was kind of showing Ailey the life that she could have if she chose to go back in time to fall in love with this person. She saw him at different stages of his life, and then she was able to make the choice to go and be with him. And I really liked that. I thought that was a great twist on the genre. And again, it was just a really nice fun read, and I just got kind of stuck straight into it. I also did an interview with the author on my blog, link in the description. Go check it out. Now, every month I set myself a challenge to read at least one non-fiction book every month. And so in May, it was Empireland by Sangira Sathnam. Now, especially with the non-fiction reads, I do try to kind of, not necessarily try, sometimes they reflect what is going on in the world or in my life, you know, whatever I'm drawn to based on the time of year or anything going on in the world. And so in May, I decided to read about British imperialism for no reason at all. So this book is about the British Empire, and it's kind of looking at it as a whole and looking at how it has impacted our daily lives today in Britain. And there are so many aspects of British life, of British culture, even kind of things that we think of as being just like the British way, that stem from empirical thinking. It was really interesting to see all those like modern day ideas, such as like the whole like Brit abroad kind of stereotype, be reflected across the centuries. And he doesn't shy away from the very horrific things committed by the British Empire. He's very open and honest about this is what happened. And here are some, you know, there were a smattering of benefits to the British Empire. Here's all the terrible things that happened because of the British Empire. And there's no kind of moral judgment. This isn't a book that's trying to make a point about the horrors of empire or about the success of empire. It's a book that's just saying, here is what happened. We have to take all of the different aspects all combined. We can't cherry pick the good or the bad. Here it is. What are we going to do with it? And I really appreciated that. I thought that was a really good approach to the book. What did feel like it was missing was a kind of wider perspective that, you know, what about some other countries, for example, that had empires, I know not on the same scale or in the same way as the British Empire, but it would have been, I think, interesting to kind of compare maybe some other countries, and also the impact on countries that used to be in the empire today, how empire has affected them to this day. A lot of the talk about other countries was in the past, whereas the Britain talk was now, and I would have liked a bit more of that kind of outlook as to how it has affected countries in the Commonwealth or former empire countries. But yeah, so it was a very, very interesting read. Just a couple of things missing for me, but really, really good. Definitely worth checking out. Then we have Neon Roses by Rachel Dawson, and full disclosure, I do know Rachel. I was very excited to get this book by NetGalley. And, you know, we live in the same city, we have a lot of the same friends and move in the same places, so I recognised a lot of things in this book, which was really, really nice. It's always nice reading a book set in the place you live. And this book is kind of inspired by the film Pride, which is about the miners' strike in the 80s and how LGSM, so a charity called Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners, was set up to support mining communities in South Wales. And this book kind of takes the perspective of a closeted queer person in one of those communities who is kind of brought into this whole new world and community via LGSM and how that would affect her life. It was a really great read. It took me a little short time to get into the writing style, but once I sort of settled into it, I just kind of devoured the whole book. It was very moving and emotional at times, had a really nice kind of arc to it, and was just, yeah, a really great story about growing up in this area. And I didn't grow up in this area, but being able to see the area around me reflected in this book was really, really enjoyable. The final book on my 4-star list may surprise you. It's Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and I was so gutted that this ended up being a 4-star book and not a 5-star book, because I loved it so much. I loved it so much. And so there was a video that Lena Norms made ages ago where she talks about how to be a truly excellent book, you've got to be like, how are they going to land this? You're flying the plane of the story. I'm butchering the metaphor, apologies. They're flying the plane of the story, and you're thinking, how are they going to land this plane? How is it going to land? And then they land it on like the tip of a pin. And this didn't quite land as beautifully as it could. And when the book is so good and then the landing doesn't hit, it kind of just had the feeling of like, oh, at the end. I've definitely read worse 5-star books. But I don't know, it just okay, we're gonna go into more detail. We're gonna chat about it. So the story in Yellowface, I'm sure you are familiar as it's been very, very talked about. So the main character, she is an author, and she isn't, well, she's not really friends, sort of college acquaintances with another author who is a huge bestseller and has all of these hit novels, whereas June, the main character, has had one book that was not particularly successful. And she's very jealous of her friend, and she also feels that her friend got a leg up by being a person of colour, that she was looked over for being white, and that because her friend was a person of colour, and her diverse story got pushed to the top of the pile. So when her friend dies, she steals the manuscript and publishes it under her own name, but kind of gives herself an ethnically ambiguous pen name and picture. And so you've got all these really interesting ideas in a sort of thriller. So this is a thriller of the theft. We're exploring all those ideas of cultural appropriation, of who gets to tell whose story, of all of that kind of thing, as well as it's all set in the kind of bookish Twitterverse, which is wild at the best of times. So you've got all of this going on, and all of these really interesting ideas that just felt like they were being explored in such an interesting and nuanced way, while still making it clear that, like, there is a right and wrong answer here. You know, she's definitely doing the wrong thing. here's why we can like delve into her psyche and see why she's managed to convince herself she's doing the right thing. And then at the end, it felt like all of that nuance kind of left, and we'd spent so much time on all of these details, and it just kind of stopped. And that just sort of let down the ending for me. So it was a really, really great book. Like, really fantastic, and you should definitely read it. The ending felt oversimplified to me. Maybe I feel differently about it now. I don't know. Now that I've had time to that it's sat with me for a bit. I actually don't know. I'm gonna have to think about it. But it was very good, and you should read it. So we are into the 5-star zone, the best books I read in May. And yeah, now this is making me reevaluate. I'm going to be honest, I'm like, is the next book I'm going to talk about better than Yellowface? And in many ways it's not, but it did it did deliver across the whole book. And that is Straight Expectations by Callum McSwiggan. Just the title sold this book to me. And it's a Freaky Friday kind of story. And the main character, he wakes up one day to find that he is straight. And nothing else is really the same, because he starts to see the way that his coming out and his identity have shaped the people around him. And it was just such a sweet story. I was so hooked from the get-go. I could not put this book down. I was desperate to know what happened. And it was just so I loved it. The friendships, the relationships. It was a really cool kind of twist on the sort of body swap Freaky Friday idea. And I just really liked how it used that in a queer context. So, for example, his coming out is what inspired his dad to take the plunge and quit the job he hated. He was like, if my 12-year-old son can be this brave, so can I. And so it's all that sort of thing, all those knock-on effects of just something being slightly different, and kind of seeing how everyone's lives had changed. But most importantly, the relationship with his best friend and how that changed. And yeah, it was just really, really sweet, and also really examined things like intersectionality really well. I thought that was approached in a really, really great way in this book, and the way that the main character kind of confronted his own blind spots was really great. And finally, the best book that I read in May is No Worries If Not by Soph Galastian. And I don't typically read memoirs that aren't like celebrity memoirs. I use celebrity, like could be politicians or authors or whatever. Someone I heard of, someone I know of, and I want to read about their life in their own words. And I had never come across Soph Galastian, I'm very sorry. I'd never come across her work before. I'm now obsessed with her. This book was so good. It's a very short book, this one, but there is so much packed in. It's a coming of age story. It's a story about grief. It's a story about coming out. It's a story about finding your path against the odds. And so there's so much packed in terms of themes and the things that she's done so far in her life. But it was also hilarious and just felt like you were chatting to a friend. I felt like I'd gone for coffee with a friend and was just sat there listening to them update me about the last 27 years of their life. We are the same age, which did mean that a lot of the cultural references felt very familiar to me. She put in playlists for each year to kind of just get you in that mindset, and also remind you what did 2010 sound like, and that was just really, really fun. It's full of pop culture references. I was not expecting to finish this book and just be like, wow, what an incredible book, what an incredible person and life and story. I can't wait to see where she goes next. And that is it. That is my long, long, long overdue May wrap up. Thank you for coming back and joining me again. And I also want to say a little thank you to a couple of people who supported me on my Ko-fi, whatever, how you pronounce it. I have it set up for commissions. I don't usually sort of advertise it for tips, but a couple of people have tipped me and it means the world. Moving house is very expensive, so even just a little couple of extra quid just went a really long way. So thank you very, very much to those people especially. And yeah, give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Comment down below what you read in May if you can remember, and I'll see you next week for my June wrap up. Have a lovely week and I'll see you next time. Ta-ra for now.